So I mentioned fractal and carbon fractal before starting the podcasts on individual actions and what you can do for mitigating climate change and reducing your carbon footprint and so on. And I didn't do a terribly good job of explaining the fractal, so I decided to add a podcast just on fractals, and if you want you can listen to it. If you want, you can of course follow up and read up more on this. So formally speaking, a fractal is a never-ending pattern that repeats itself at different scales. This property is called self-similarity. So you cut it into pieces and pieces and pieces, and some shapes are maintained along the way. Fractals are extremely complex, sometimes infinitely complex, meaning you can zoom in and find the same shapes forever. Amazingly, fractals are extremely simple to make. We will see how nature makes a lot of them, and of course math and algebra can make a lot of them too. A fractal is made by repeating a simple process again and again. So it can be a very harmless looking simple equation which has little nonlinearity, or kind of a feedback process which produces fractals. So in nature we'll see some more examples, but this is let's say a tree and leaves and trunk and stem of the leaf. So you can see how the tree and the leaves can look the same. Of course there is a theory that the tree itself evolved, or the leaves evolved after the tree evolved. It had to build a hard structure to stand up and then have leaves to capture the sunlight, so they are not independent evolutions anyways. So we will see how this evolves, but you can see how as you zoom in there are triangles of different sizes going down to infinite scales, and in algebra you can produce these amazing beautiful patterns which can be symmetric or asymmetric depending on your equations, and you can keep on zooming in and the patterns are similar at various time scales. So here is the previous figure. You can see how you can keep on zooming and you see smaller and smaller triangles embedded within the bigger triangles. You can see examples. Neurons from the human cortex. The branching of our brain cells creates the incredibly complex network that is responsible for all we perceive, imagine and remember. So here the scale is 100 microns, what we are looking at. Our lungs are branching fractals with surface area of 100 meters squared. Imagine it's sitting inside, but it's if you expand it out, it would be 100 meters squared. Similarly, to a tree, the similarity to a tree is significant, as lungs and trees both use large surface areas to exchange oxygen and CO2. The scale here is 30 centimeters. So the surface area to volume ratio becomes very critical for leaves and lungs and any cells that are trying to exchange fluids, nutrients, oxygen, CO2 across the interfaces. This is a Lichtenberg Lightning formed by rapidly discharging electrons in lucite. The scale here is 10 centimeters, again a fractal shape. Oak tree formed by a sprout branching and then each of the branches branching again, etc. Scale here is 30 meters, so you can see the similarity here to various fractal systems. This is a river network in China formed by erosion from repeated rainfall flowing downhill for millions of years. So this is 300 kilometer scale here, so you can see how all these begin to look similar. So there are lots of debates about why ecological flows and systems like this on our Earth and in the galaxy begin to have similar shapes. Rotation has a lot to do with it, of course. A hurricane is a self-organizing spiral in the atmosphere driven by the evaporation and condensation of seawater with a 500 kilometer scale across. A spiral galaxy is the largest natural spiral composing hundreds of billions of stars. The scale here is 100,000 light years, or order 10 to the 20 meters. Okay, some biological examples. A fossilized ammonite from 300 million years ago, a simple primitive organism. It built its spiral shell by adding pieces that glow and twist at a constant rate. A meter scale. A fiddlehead fern. Here a plant kingdom full of spirals. This is the agave cactus. So coming back to the carbon fractal then, this is a visual representation of the potential trajectory of a specific targeted system in the fractal with two attractors. So fractal systems tend to have these attractors. Think of it like a maze. No matter where you start, you're going to end up at the same point, unless there are barriers and you have to trace back and so on, which also can happen in a fractal system. So this is the expected future level of decarbonization, and we are here at A and B as the potential interventions in the system below and above the critical threshold point at which the system can go to this attractor where we are in a carbon lock-in. So whatever we do, we're going to keep emitting carbon, or we can transition to the other attractor which will take us to complete decarbonization. So I will talk a little bit more about these so-called potential interventions, especially social interventions, and what are the levers in the system that can allow us to drive or engineer these transition to a different attractor than the one we are in. So here are examples of attractors from this website. Basically you can imagine that you can keep on looping through these systems and never get out, because you are always going to hit some strange attractor. It again sounds a little bit vague. It's a good concept, but you can imagine, let's say you are on this loop here, you can keep on going in many intrinsic internal small scale loops, but eventually you're going to be just stuck on this. So these kind of fractal systems have so-called strange attractors, and there are lots of details that we will not worry about here. So I just wanted to add this little brief introduction to fractals in case you were curious. So I'll come back to individual actions after this, so that you can see why decarbonization is a better metaphor than emissions reduction. Okay.